Evening, ladies as well as gentlemen. Papa Boris here with some more Human Resource Machine. We're gonna skip 3 Sword for now. This one is really difficult. I'll do a whole separate video on it for now, later. But for now, let's go ahead and do the first of these green levels. It's a very sad day. My, excuse me, my hair has turned green. Ah, I'm an old lady. Where has the pigtailed green-haired lady gone, I wonder? Although, really, you know, that green hair was dyed to begin with. Wonder why the girl just doesn't keep dyeing her hair. Anyway, the point is, blah blah blah. This is a tutorial level, so the puzzle itself is actually quite easy, but again, it involves some difficult programming concepts, so the puzzle is easy to kind of match. Basically, you can now access tiles. They call it indirectly. So in other words, if I copy from here, I'm going to pick up the number 8, but if I copy from 8 indirectly, as denoted by this bracket, I'm gonna basically pick up whatever is on the 8th spot on the floor. So notice here, copy from that, no brackets, I just pick up the 8. Copy from this, with the brackets, I pick up what's on the 8th spot on the floor, which is Y. Okay? So the puzzle itself is not really that much of a puzzle. You just need to pick up whatever's at the address of the number in the inbox. So let's go ahead and call this place our address. We'll be using an address variable in many of the upcoming puzzles. Take a number, copy it to the address, then we copy from the address indirectly, we outbox it, we go back to the beginning. That's the entire puzzle. I'm not joking, that's the whole thing. Yeah, so I take an 8, put it down, copy from the 8th spot on the floor, it's a Y, repeat the process. 5. Copy from the 5th spot on the floor, pick up a D. Outbox it. Yeah, that's it. So I don't even know if I really needed to do this one in the video series, but it's there. So that's that puzzle. Yeah, clearly this is the solution the designers intended. I'd be shocked if there's any way to do it faster than this. But that's that one. Then we get on to the next one, the string storage floor. This is still a tutorial level. This is really not a very difficult puzzle, but they're kind of introducing you to the idea of using 0 terminated strings to read like lists of things from the floor. So you have to outbox the item from the floor and all the ones that are after it until you reach a 0. So basically, I take a number from the inbox, add it to the address. No, I do want the R. Oh, geez. Copy to the address. Then I read from the address. And it's important to note for this one, they're never going to point you to a 0 at the start. If they could, then this would be a little bit of a tougher challenge, but they're not going to point you to a 0 straight away. So, your first value is always going to be a real one. Then you outbox whatever was at that address. And at this point, you basically repeat the process after bumping up the address by 1. Now, of course, you might realize, wait a minute, we actually have to check to see if, there's a 0 at some point, and we can just basically insert that here. So after we copy from the address, if what we're holding is a 0, then we're done with that string, and we can put it back at the beginning. But if it's not a 0, then we deliver it, bump the address up by 1, and go back to the beginning. So I'll just show it to you step by step here. Really hope I didn't screw this up. A mantra I repeat over and over. As you would know why if you've seen all the failed videos or failed attempts to make videos for this series. So I copy from 4, which is that T. It's not a 0. Stick it in the outbox. Bump my 4 up to a 5. Copy from the 5. It's not 0, so I stick it in the outbox. Bump the address. Alright, this time when I go to the address, I get a 0, which means I'm done. I don't actually care about the 0. So I get the next value in the inbox, and if it worked for that one, it should work for all of them. So I don't know why they give you so many inputs here. I don't know if that's to prevent cheating, maybe? Prevent you from hard coding in what to send if you don't realize how these addresses work. But anyway, it's gonna take a bajillion steps, but I mean the logic is clearly sound. It's always an arrogant thing to say in a conversation, well, the logic is clearly sound, so I don't know why you're still talking at me. Okay, so that was that one. 2 tutorial levels in a row here, getting you to understand how to work with addresses. Now, we are going to, of course, do a real puzzle in this video, and this is actually a pretty difficult one. String reverse. I mean, pretty difficult. I don't know if I could say it's pretty difficult. It's an actual puzzle, let's put it that way. It's not, pretty transparent like the previous 2 were. It's you know, it's a real puzzle. I wouldn't call it pretty difficult. I think the next one, which I'll do in the next video, is what I could legitimately call, you know, pretty difficult. Okay, so here our goal is to reverse the string and then put the result into the outbox. So there's going to be two different solutions for this. At least I could not find a way to optimize it in both ways in the same line, in the same block of code. So for that reason alone, it's a little bit more of a trickier puzzle. We're gonna do the fast way first because the logic of the program is easier to follow when you're doing it the fast way. And then I'll show you how to cut down some lines of code to make the size optimization. So basically, there's gonna be two phases. There's gonna be the phase where we add stuff to the board, and then there's gonna be the phase where we basically read back what we wrote. So I take my first number. Now, if the first number is 0, that means I've got an empty string. And, excuse me, not an empty string, I beg your pardon. Let me actually just not put the 0 in there for the time being. We'll insert that later. I'm going to copy it to my address. All right. So that's my first address. Or, no, I'm not going to copy it. Jesus Christ. I'm not going to copy it to the address. I'm going to copy it to the current address. So not this actual spot on the floor, but to the spot it's pointing to. So that's going to be my first spot. And then I need to bump the address by 1, because the next thing I take is going to need to go into the next spot. Now after I bump, I repeat the process. Take the next number or the next letter from the inbox, copy it to the current address, and bump the address. Now, if the number that I have taken is a... Actually, I have the wrong thing here. This needs to be the address. Oh my god, I really screwed up with that terminology there. Anyway, if the number that I've just taken is a 0, then I'm done copying and jumping, and now I need to rewind. Now, the reason this is going to look a little bit redundant here, I'm actually going to bump the address back by 1. I have to do this because I just bumped it up, but then I realized my next number was a 0, so I don't need to put the 0 in. I need to bump the address back down by 1 to basically get the last letter that I put in. So I copy the letter that I had just put in there, I outbox it, and then I repeat the process. I keep on decreasing the address, taking the letter at that address, and sending it back. Of course, there's going to come a time where my address equals 0. I need to know when to stop. Once I hit a 0, then that means I go to the next phase of the program, which is that I copy from this place in the address, I outbox it, and I jump all the way back to the beginning. Because once I've hit a 0, I need to do this essentially for the last time. Okay, so, you know, while I'm looking at it, there is a lot of, like, redundant code. Maybe there is actually a way to do the same stuff, but with fewer lines, and I just didn't try hard enough to find it. Hard to say, but let's just take you through a few steps. There's basically, you know, the logic at least is clear. There's the first phase, and there's the second phase, and then finally the third phase for every string. So the first phase is when you're recording things to the floor. I record my F, bump the address, take this, put it there, bump the address, take the next thing, speed up these steps a little bit, take the next thing. Okay, now the next thing I take from the inbox is a 0. So I go down to the next phase of the program. Now it's time to read back what I wrote. But notice, actually let me back up. Notice 4 is actually pointing to an empty space. This is why we have to bump the 4 back down and then read from it. So we take that H, put it in the outbox, bump the address down, take the S, put it in the outbox, bump her down, take the I, stick it in the outbox, bump her down. Here's the last one. So for the last one, I jump to the third phase of the program, which is oh, Jesus Christ. This needs to be an indirect read rather than a direct one. But yes, I were to take that F, put it in the outbox, and then jump back to the beginning. So let's show you just to make sure that I've gotten it right. I bump it down to 0. Instead of putting the 0 into my hands, I just take the H into my hands and stick it in there. And we go back to the beginning with the next string. So it worked for one, should work for all of them. Proink, proink, proinkity-doo. We bug her. That's funny. So So that's the speed address, the speed optimization, and I mean it must be pretty good, even though it looks like there might have been some ways to shave time. I mean clearly I didn't do too bad of a job since I beat their speed challenge, but I do need to cut a couple of lines of code here. So how do I do it? Well, in order to save some lines of code, we're gonna have to have a lot of crazy jumping. Basically, I take a number from the inbox. Now, if that number is 0, that means that I need to start reading back my phrase. So let's make our address variable here. So basically, I bump the address down by 1, just like in the previous case. And now I'm going to do something a little different. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if it's negative, then I'm going to go in here where I bump the address back. It's like I got down to -1, I bump it back up to 0, and then I jump back to the beginning. So that's what I do if it's 0, which is admittedly quite confusing. So if it's 0, what I've just taken, I bump the address back by 1, and if it's negative, that means I've finished. So I bump it back up to 0 and jump back to the beginning. If it's not negative, that means I need to actually read from it. So I read from the address, submit it to the outbox, and then I jump here. So this part of the code is pretty straightforward. This is the part where you're like decreasing the address every time and delivering the number if the address is still not 0, or otherwise if it is 0, or basically if you've reached past the 0, then you get it ready for the next string by putting it back up to 0 and jumping up. However, if this thing I've just taken from the inbox is not 0, then I copy it to the next place, to the next address. And so you can see here, this looks really crazy, but I'm basically saying, okay, if the number is not 0, I copy it to the next place in the address, bump the address up by 1, and jump back to the inbox and repeat the process. I'm just also using this little bit of code, bump the address, and repeat the process, to end the process as well. It's I don't even know how I come up with it, because as I'm saying the words out loud, it actually doesn't seem to make any sense. So I apologize. This is clearly not my finest moment as a teacher, but let's just at least see how it works. I bump up the address, and then I take the next value, copy it, bump up the address, take the next value, bump the address, or sorry, restore it, bump the address, take the next value. This next value is 0, so we jump down here, where I start to read it back. I read back the last letter, then I read back the letter before that, and then I read back the letter before that, and see, I don't actually know that I'm done yet. I didn't check for 0 there. I just now check if it's negative. I'm like, oh, it's negative, so we're done. So I bump the address up to 0, and then I go back to the beginning. So this way, we can save ourselves a few lines of code. And again, it's the same phrase, debugger. And so you can see this is not quite optimal speed-wise because of all these jumps, but it does beat the size challenge by 1. So that's the best way that I was able to come up with. And you know, how long has this video been? Yeah, it's only been 13 minutes, but I'm actually gonna save this one till the next video, because this one's a really tough one. I'm probably just gonna do like this one all by itself in one video. Maybe I'm overestimating it. In that case, we can watch Where's Carol and do the Val Incinerator, but I think this is gonna take like a good chunk of time. So these are our introductions to indirect addresses, basically reading data from a place indirectly instead of just taking the number that's there. And then this next thing is a pretty hard puzzle. It took me a really long time to figure out, that actually involves the stuff that we were sort of tutorialized on in puzzles 29 through 31. I'll see you back soon for that one. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please like and/or subscribe.